Yeah.
Okay, so we're rolling with some spontaneity here, but I've just thought of this idea called Game B Conversations, and basically, you're on this Facebook page that we've just recently created, and the concept is that uh, you record one-on-one conversations or multiple conversations, however you want to do it, and then you post these conversations into the Game B Conversations Facebook group, and then you can have like a conversation. You can write comments about it or whatever it is. But the idea is to see what the emergent person is between the two people who are having the conversation. So the conversation between Nick and I is this emergent personality of Nick Richie, or like whatever name you'd have of it. So yeah, like what are your thoughts about that idea?
I really like that concept because it really gets into what I just mentioned, which is like this symbiosis. And there is this always an essence, inner phenomenon to what is occurring between me and you. And it's not just one emergent property, but there are so many attributes that could occur, and even archetypes that could develop between you and I in this merging of traits and just free expression, and really trying to preserve and build on this architecture that we're slowly building together. So
Mm.
I think with this idea, it will really give people a space and maybe some methods even of freestyling their own at their own pace, their own expressions with another person, and trying to build these kind of two mind structures. And I hope people enjoy this, and I hope it kicks off something.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be noticed within this space as well, because one of the things that I guess, because while I'm participating in the conversation with you, I can notice this aspect that, like, the way that I'm participating is that I've got, like, your part of the conversation is more abstract, more sort of far out. So you have this, you kind of, whenever I throw you something, you'll sort of like pull it out into all of these different parts, and then you'll sort of break it down, and then you'll form it into another question. You'll be like, okay, well, what is the question that comes out of this process of dissolving things, and then you throw that back to me, and then I have my own process. So you sort of expand things, and then I pull them back together. It's like, okay, well, I think I have an answer for this, and then I throw that back to you, and so there's kind of this emergent relationship that we have of, like, the puller or aparter and the reconstitutor, and then it's this feedback.
I really
Um,
like that a lot. Yeah, that's exactly what we have. We have this. You are. I feel like your mind in relation to mine is like a sharp knife that
hmm,
can really hone in on these really beautiful curves and shapes, and really try to bring the color out, and really try to explain logic and rationale of where this could go, where it should go, and not necessarily just simplify it into an equation, but rather just humbly express where it, it could lead and how it could be beneficial to me and you and others, while I kind of enter this deep sense of skepticism. And I like to think abstract creativity, where I kind of try to unleash this deconstruction, reconstruction, deconstruction, and try to eliminate all structure while also absorbing all the possibilities of authentic structure. So in my stancelessness, in my attempt to not have a strict faith or conviction or goal or orientation, um, I'm willing to accept actual possible paths of communication to act upon, because I don't have any bias preventing me from acknowledging so stuff like that.
yeah, which is good, because I have sort of a sort of oppositional point of view, whereas where I have an actual bias. Like, I might, because we were talking earlier about this idea of, like, practicality versus the infinite sort of philosophical space, and you were just like, well, we should just keep exploring the infinite possible space, because like, that's a frontier which is interesting to explore. Whereas my sort of opposing opinion about that was that you can only have that infinite explorative space if you have the practical requirements taken care of. So you can't just sustain people's ability to engage in philosophy without actually having the necessary preconditions for philosophy to emerge. So unless you have, conscious creatures which have developed prefrontal cortexes, which live in societies which are rich enough to afford people the space to think and not just have their thoughts be focused on taking care of their, immediate needs such as food and shelter and those kinds of things, then that's when you can actually start exploring that space. But in order to maintain that, you have to come back to this practical element, and then you can build upon it. But there's also this nice relationship where if you go back to the practical, then you can actually focus the practical on enhancing, not just sustaining the ability to explore the philosophical, but also to enhance the ability to explore the philosophical. So if we can become more efficient at that process, then we can actually just upregulate the whole thing together.
Yeah, and I really like that because you really, even though you claim that you have a bias, uh, exactly what you expressed and what you've expressed before in our private conversation, it's very all encompassing.
Hmm.
It's not a bias that's limiting you,
Hmm.
but it's more just kind of like it's not even really inclination. I feel like you have sort of an intuition of like, yeah, everything that you're saying makes sense, but this one thing though, it's like an insight, it's like a kernel of truth that you're sticking to, and that you want to make sure that you don't get rid of willy-nilly,
Hmm.
because it actually has relevance, and it can actually guide and shape real cause and effect structures. And what I was trying to put in relation to that was kind of like the parallax by which you even develop these pragmatics at
Hmm.
the primordial level, at the metaphysical level, cannot be separated from philosophy.
Hmm.
So that was the interesting curiosity I tried posing to you, and I really felt like we got farther as well. And
Hmm.
there's still much more to explore, which is this idea of, it really seems like there is this pragmatic space, and then there's this separate philosophical space, and yet somehow you can go your entire life being a critical thinker and being pragmatic and never having to deal with the philosophical space, even though all the actions that you are enveloping yourself in have some kind of a philosophical underpinning, regardless of whether or not you acknowledge them.
Yeah.
But then philosophy has to deal with the same problem. It has to deal with the problem of, even though philosophy, it can infinitely negate itself, and it can transcend all paradox and contradiction and just absorb it into its body like a germ. At the same time, how is that germ possible?
Hmm.
And even though that's a philosophical question, eventually you'll get to a point where, hey, would you look at that, I found this neuron that can control philosophical cognition. And if I click it in this way, seems like I can't philosophize anymore. Which, it
Hmm.
goes back to what you're saying about how pragmatism can enlighten philosophy, especially in the sense of, like, let's say, neurobiology and cognitive science. It can literally change the very paradigm, the very supposed ontology that I held so dear of philosophy itself, just by moving one neuron's specific action potential, for example.
Hmm. Yeah, and there's this shared like toolkit that we have of philosophy. So there's kind of we understand each other sort of straight away in terms of the way that we're going to approach something. Like it's obvious to both of us why it is that we would explore in that particular direction. Whereas I think, like, the interesting thing about the game B space is there's all of these people and they all think in all different ways, but when you click with someone in that space, then there's this opening of potential within the shared framework that you work with. So philosophy might be the shared framework that we really connect with, and then with someone else it might be something more specific. Maybe it's art or something like that. And then you can, like, as brains have neurons, people can be sort of neurons that connect, and we have stronger and weaker connections between one another. And then we can sort of have this like larger brain of the game B structure. So we can figure out which neurons perform, like roughly which part of the brain. So we might have the philosophy part, which is like the hippocampus or something. And then we've got the prefrontal cortex part, which is, I don't know, like the more practical stuff, or, you know, whatever it is. And then we can figure out who's got which part, who plays which part really well, and who uses what what structures make up the way that they interpret the world. And then how do we figure out who goes where? So if one group of people is trying to puzzle out this particular problem, and someone's like, oh, well, we've actually got this person who thinks in this particular way, then you can reach out and make that connection, and then figure out, well, who's the person who's really good at making that person more intelligible? So you bring that person in, and then you have the dialogue between them, and then you can make sense of that. But I think part of the idea of having this Facebook page of conversations between people is also, rather than just having talking to everyone, because it takes a lot of time, you can just see how that person emerges within a conversation, and within the different conversations. So you can actually get a sense of their mind without having to actually interact with them. And then you can there's an efficiency to that. And then we can actually measure these things to some extent. So maybe there's someone in the group who's really interested in figuring, like, or really attentive to the particular relationship. So maybe they can identify, okay, well, what these people are doing, like, you know, like, I'm not a part of their conversation that they've had and recorded, but there's something about what they're doing which I can see how that fits into something else. And then so I can reach out and make those connections, and then, you know, start building something up. Like, I think there's something to be built here. But
I really agree, and that's why I like this idea of this game be conversation so much. Yeah, there really is. If we get people to have conversations in their own ways and
mm,
explore all the possibilities at their own pace,
mm,
and just hone in on whatever instincts or whatever they feel like they lean more towards, without this emphasis on a particular vocabulary or a
mm,
specific meta narrative. Um, not only is there space for emergence, but there's also this space for anyone who posts on this thread, this meta conversation of looking at conversations like how you're saying, and how we can analyze what's really going on, and how we could immediately be like, oh, look, these two guys had a conversation today. Maybe let me talk with one of them, and like Richie, you talk with one of them and I talk another one with them, or vice versa, and let's see where that goes. And then it just becomes like this, almost like a family.
mm,
um and I really think it could lead to something bigger, where and I like the analogy that you use with like a specific neuronal species, and who to put where, and let's see what would happen if we experimented in that way or another. So I'm really curious to see where this goes, and I bet since both of us are going to be free a lot lately, I
mm.
feel like we're going to chug a lot of interesting conversations along, and I can't wait for that too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if somebody wants to talk to either one of us, just reach out, and then we can figure out those conversations, and then see where we intersect, and then see who the person is that is the intersection between us two people. Or maybe more. Maybe we can play with the numbers of people. Maybe 3 is a better number, or maybe 4 is a better number. Like, there's a space to explore here, which we're currently not exploring. And I think the other thing that's kind of interesting about this is almost like it makes sense to engage in this practice, because it's also kind of a fractal split of the way that we got into this place in the first place, because most of us know about these conversations and met these people because we were listening to the conversations of other people, such as Jordan Hall or Daniel Schmachtenberger, etc. Like, so we were listening to their conversations, and now it's like, okay, well, why don't we participate in the same way? Why don't we have conversations? And because we've got the open channels and the accessibility, now we can just like link between the conversations. So if you think this conversation is interesting, you've got an opportunity to participate in it, because you've got access to the participants. And then it just opens a whole new field. And you can actually form relationships. Like, you know, I actually like, you know, talking to you, Nick. And it's like, it's cool. Like there's a friendship here as well. So it's not just kind of, we're on a message board and we're just typing characters, and you're just like, oh, well, I mean, I'm interpreting the like really low bandwidth signal of this person. Like, most of the things
Right.
but I can't really explore that. I can't see their face. I can't like see their joy and all their facial expressions and these kinds of things. Like there's just there's so much more here.
Exactly. Yeah, this really has the potential to just be greater, a greater emotive and even sort of like a spiritual or an essence based endeavor. And there really is this kind of non-script that we're going off of, this kind of free flow, uh where we could just tap into, oh, let's go in this direction, let's go in that direction, and then if similar attributes arise, we can just build our architecture on that. And if no similarities are there, there's this interesting balance between listening and then speaking cautiously, and it's all for like mutual enjoyment,
Mm,
because I'm an agent and you're an agent, and we have uh, a personality and instincts of our own. Let's That should be enough to be like, oh my god, we're both alive, let's talk about that. And that I would be really curious to see where people lead off into, because I've been parts of conversations where it's like 4 or 5 people, and people have a lot of interesting stuff to say.
mm,
And there is this trend of having a conversation with maybe 4 to 6 people. But and I'm not saying, I'm not me personally, I'm not a big believer that it depends on the quantity of the group that has a big impact, but I
mm,
more believe in the uh kind of group spirit. Depending on what the group is, will depend on whether the number or not has any value other than what I think, in my opinion, of what numbers mean.
mm,
So I really think it shouldn't be limited to two, but this is a sort of back to the traditional sense of how we used to communicate, right? Maybe not back in the day, back in ancient history, but just sort of this sort of modern approach of like, we're 2 people and we have an intent to kind of learn more about each other. Why not explore that? Because it's very easy to just be like, okay, one person, infinite variations in their mind.
mm.
Okay, that's enough for me. And yeah, so it would be interesting for people to explore maybe that one-on-one space, as opposed to that 4 to 6 person space where perhaps there's this like hidden kind of goal, kind of emphasized but not really emphasized. Uh, there should be more of this like free flux, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think we can play with the different characteristics because like the different amounts of people change things, but it's kind of uncertain how they change things because it also like the numbers are a variable, but the types of people that make up those numbers are also a variable. So maybe there's like these 4 people who are really good at having four-way conversations and like they've just got like a natural rhythm to them. And then maybe other, like when I show up in a four-way conversation, I find it really difficult because there's not enough space for me to talk. I feel like it, and so I'm kind of always battling against the sense of like, oh, I really want to just like interject and kind of put my own thing out here. Whereas I find a one-on-one conversation is really good for me because you can just say your thing, and then I'm like, okay, like when you stop talking, then I get a chance to talk and respond, and then we get like it's much easier rhythm. But maybe for other people, it's easier to just sit back and listen, and they feel like they've got more presence in that kind of environment. So, I mean, there's just a lot to play with here. So, I
Yeah.
think, yeah.
Uh, um, I was going to add as well, and maybe you'd agree, in the kind of 3, 4, 5, 6 person dynamic, most people, at least on a subconscious level, are not really comfortable with this. Like for example, let's say we're in a group of 4 to 6 people, and I feel like I'm really connecting with one of those people in that 6 group conversation.
Hmm.
It's not going to feel instinctually right to kind of interject on the conversation and try to develop a rapport with that one specific person,
Hmm.
because there's not really a strong uh, mm, understanding of what's rude and what's not.
Mm,
And even though most people in the game B space are live very authentically and organically when it comes to these conversations, there's still this difficulty of social dynamics.
mm,
Everyone's still kind, but then that might lead to the fact of no one talking, or people feeling awkward, or everyone talking at once because everyone feels uh, like it's their right to talk.
mm,
So there's still this ambiguous factor
mm.
that in a one-on-one situation can be addressed more lightly, I think. And it really, again, in a one-on-one friendship, there's so much room. Like if you just say one specific thing, and I feel like there's this undertone attitude, I
Mm,
could really just take the time to nitpick and color and flavor that specific part of your brain. And you can give me the ability to do that. And if you don't give me the ability to do that, we could talk about that. And it doesn't feel exposed per se,
mm,
especially in a game B space when we're just starting to figure out how to act in a group.
mm.
Perhaps starting in this one-on-one space, talking about group dynamics in this one-on-one space will help us grow into the group dynamic.
Yeah, and I think there's an attention to the responsiveness and the relationship and like the shadow elements as well. I think that's worth addressing usually, that you can attend to in a one-on-one conversation, because you said earlier like there's an element of rudeness if you're trying to build rapport with someone while you're also part of a four-way conversation. It's like, okay, well that doesn't seem like the appropriate relation scenario to do that. So yeah, one-on-one, like maybe that's what it's optimal for, is to build those friendships, to build those stronger bonds. But I mean, I think there's a sense in which you know whether or not there's a connection there, and then that's something worth pursuing. And I think people in this space should really have a freedom to discern who it is that they would like to spend more time with and less time with. And I think we just have to have the kind of humility and openness to be like, okay, well that's cool. You can do what your thing is. I don't think we can expect things of one another or demand things from one another. But I think one of the nice things about the people in this space, or at least all of the people that I've encountered, is there's this underlying underlying set of principles that we all bring to the table. Like we're all honest people. We all just like show up as ourselves. Sometimes different parts of ourselves, because we're not like one continuous person. And we're all kind of respectful, and we're all kind of open to feedback, because like I was saying with the shadow thing earlier, like we're imperfect people. We're always getting things wrong. We always make assumptions. We have our biases, all these kinds of things. But if we have a space where people can reflect back to us the value that we have, and the disadvantages that we might have, or the maybe the and the thing is, it's like it's also just their opinion, so it's not necessarily true. If someone tells you you're being an asshole, maybe you are being an asshole, but maybe you're not being an asshole. So like you're also free to, you also have the sovereignty to determine how you feel about a particular interaction or statement or anything like that. But like I think just mutually, like walking into the space with the intention of mutually benefiting one another, I think is a really important attribute that most people, or all of the people that I've interacted with so far, have in this space. And that's just, that has so much potential, especially because conversation as a medium for participation and exchange of ideas, it's the highest bandwidth thing we have. So let's take advantage of it. Let's make the most of this unique group of people who have all done their research in their particular fields, or explored their parts of their mind, or gone through the experiences that they've gone through. Because everyone's got experiences that are relevant to the things that you're interested in. So if you can put yourself in a place to hear those stories and to have those conversations, then you can grow so much as a person. Um, yeah, it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
there's so much here, but
Yeah, and I love that because in the conversation we had before, which we definitely should have freaking recorded, man. You were right. Uh we should definitely have the conversation tomorrow and just expand it to new avenues if you like.
mm,
But when I mentioned the substrata of necessity, which is kind of like when you're in a one-on-one conversation, there are and you're a keen, cautious, and um, aware person in terms of decency of other agents that are also alive. You realize some people need specific outcomes to occur,
mm,
um, that in a group environment, if you're put too quickly into a group consciousness or consensus, there might not be that there might be this inclination towards, yes, I do want to talk to other people, I do want to get out there and broaden my horizons, and I really do believe in this movement. But at the same time, it's like, hey, you know what, I'm not ready, and that's okay. But just because I'm not ready doesn't mean I want to miss out, and it shouldn't mean I have to miss out. But if I still want to talk to someone that really inspires me in this game B space or in any intellectual space, I should be able to have the capacity to do so. And if we have this substrata of necessity of just like, hey, I realize that you are like, you're having a difficulty speaking about something. Maybe I'll be more sensitive to that issue, or I'll be more courteous. And it really just comes down to not even trust. It really just comes down to, are you alive, and what are the parameters of how I would treat someone who is conscious?
mm,
And it really comes down to that. It's not about, oh, can I trust what this person is saying, but it's more of a matter. It's a different type of tight rope walk, where
mm,
you kind of just like, how can I treat this person with a modicum of mutual respect, regardless of whether or not I have the certainty of whether I can trust them. Because that's the whole point of the one-on-one conversation, right? Feeling each other out, kind of like receptors, while at the same time gaining rapport and exploring all these little avenues. That's kind of the excitement of it. And doubt is a part of that. It's perfectly healthy and natural. But the only thing that's unhealthy is discrimination to me.
mm,
And that's it. As long as you don't discriminate little finite details about a person's being, the conversation has an infinite amount of variety that it could take toll in. And I think it would be beautiful to see how certain aspects of that butt up and fertilize other conversations.
mm. I think so too. All right, so maybe we'll wrap this section up, but just yeah, let us know what you think, um, and yeah, participate if you're interested in this. Have your own conversations, record them through Zoom, and then post them on here, and then we can just reflect back and see if we can build something. Like maybe it just doesn't work. Maybe we tried the Parallax Discord server and it just kind of fizzled out. Like there was definitely something useful in there, but it didn't quite take off. But maybe this is a thing that takes off. Maybe it isn't. Like it doesn't really matter. But we're engaging in serious play, and I think the more we can do the serious play, the more we can find relationships and cultivate ideas and refine skills and all these kinds of good things. But yeah, any last remarks before we?
Oh, no, that was pretty beautifully wrapped up. But I just want to say, if you maybe we should leave our information. Well, since you're gonna be the one posting it, I guess. Oh, we'll just tag each other in it, so they'll know where to find us in order to contact us.
Yeah, I mean, just do it through the Facebook. Just leave a comment and just be like, "Oh, hey, I'd like to have a conversation with Nick, or have a conversation with Richie," and then we'll do it. Or just like find your own people. Be like, "Oh, hey, I'd really like to have a conversation with you. We should record it, and then we should put it on the page, and then see what other people think." But yeah,
Yep, just build up. I hope this builds up as much as it can. This will be fun to figure it out.
we'll see. All right, looking forward to it.
Yep.
Catch you guys.